My daughter said I should be grateful that she allowed me to sit in the audience of her wedding. This was after she humiliated me in front of everyone by asking her mom's boyfriend to walk her down the aisle. I didn't react. I just walked out and never returned. What happened next will shock you. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Joel Ray from California. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I always believed that fatherhood, real fatherhood, was about showing up even when no one claps for you. There's no trophy for changing diapers at 2 in the morning or for holding down 2 jobs while trying to make your daughter believe the world is safe, even when yours is falling apart. My name's Raymond, but to her, I was always just Dad. From the moment she was born, red-faced and hollering like she owned the hospital wing, I knew I was done for. My whole world had shrunk to 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and nothing else mattered. Not the crumbling marriage, not the bills, not even the aching exhaustion in my bones. All I wanted was to see her smile and know I gave her something better than what I'd had growing up. Her mother and I divorced when she was 10. It wasn't a clean break. How could it be when resentment had been simmering for years? We tried the whole stay friends for the kid performance, but it unraveled quicker than I could fake a smile. She got the house, I got the kid on weekends. But even then, I did more than the minimum. I didn't just do the every other weekend dance. I showed up to every parent-teacher conference, every recital, every emergency room visit. When she wanted to join the swim team, I drove 45 minutes each way before and after work just so she wouldn't miss a practice. When she wanted a dog, I made it happen, even though my apartment barely had room for me. I figured love showed up in action, not words. I figured she saw that. I really did. As she got older, she grew quieter around me. Not distant exactly, just less eager. Teenage years, I told myself. Hormones, moods, whatever. She'd always bounce back after a good meal or a dumb joke. But then her mother's boyfriend entered the picture, Richard. The man walked like he owned the damn earth. Clean shoes, smug grin, too many opinions. I watched him weasel his way into their lives like he belonged there, like I was the inconvenient relic of a past she wanted to erase. He started showing up at school events, sitting beside my ex-wife like he'd earned the right to be part of the family narrative. And the worst part? My daughter didn't push him away. She let him inch closer. I still remember the first time she called him Rick, like they were best friends. That name felt like a brick against my chest. Still, I told myself it didn't mean anything. I reminded myself that weddings are stressful and daughters get pulled in a million directions. When she announced her engagement, she did it via text. Just a grainy photo of the ring and a short "he proposed." I stared at the screen for a while, waiting for more. Maybe a "can't wait for you to walk me down the aisle," or even a simple "let's talk about the wedding." But nothing came, just silence. So, I congratulated her, told her I'd be there for anything she needed. She didn't respond for 3 days. When she finally did, it was about money. "I was wondering if you could help pay for the venue," she wrote, as if we'd just been chatting yesterday. "It's my dream place." Of course I said yes. Of course, I opened my wallet like a fool. She wanted the full fairy tale, and I was going to give it to her, even if I wasn't sure I belonged in it. I paid for the venue, the dress, the catering. I offered my home to her and her fiancé while they saved for a deposit on their own place. My lawyer drew up a basic living agreement. No rent, just respect. I didn't ask for anything else. I figured being included, being valued, would come naturally. That was my mistake. The days leading up to the wedding were strange. She barely spoke to me, always rushing off to another appointment or dress fitting. When I tried to help, she told me her mom already handled it. I started to feel like a guest at an event I was funding, but I didn't complain. I told myself that this was her day, not mine. That maybe she'd surprise me. Maybe she was saving something special for me during the ceremony. Fathers hope like that. We build whole castles out of crumbs. The night before the wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner. I stood near the back, watching her flit from table to table like a movie star. She didn't ask me to give a toast. She didn't even acknowledge me when her fiancé's parents spoke. I chalked it up to nerves, to busyness. After all, tomorrow was the big day. My moment would come. I woke up early that morning, pressed my suit twice, checked the mirror 6 times. I carried the handkerchief she gave me when she was 12. It had a note sewn into it. To Dad, who always caught me. I kept touching it like it was armor, like it would protect me from whatever weird energy had been building. I got to the venue early, sat where they told me to sit, waited for someone to tell me when it was time. But no one did. 15 minutes before the ceremony, a bridesmaid rushed past and muttered something about a change in lineup. I didn't think much of it. Maybe the flower girl had a meltdown. Maybe someone switched songs. I sat, hands folded, heart pounding. Then the music started. Everyone stood. And then I saw it. Richard, in his stupid tailored suit, arm in arm with my daughter, walking her down the aisle like he was the one who'd held her through night terrors, who sold his car to pay her tuition, who gave up everything so she wouldn't grow up feeling abandoned. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I watched her eyes avoid mine like I wasn't even there. That was the moment. That's when I knew she'd made her choice long before the wedding ever began. When the music faded and everyone sat, I quietly stood. No scene. No words. I walked down the side aisle and out the door, just like that. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked why. Maybe they thought I was going to the bathroom. Maybe they didn't care. Either way, I left that place and never turned back. I drove home in silence, tossed the handkerchief on the kitchen counter, and stared at the wall for hours. My phone buzzed once. A message from her. You should be grateful I still let you attend. I didn't reply. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just called my lawyer. The silence in my house that night was deafening. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't turn on the TV. I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at that single sentence on my phone like it had the power to physically cave my chest in. You should be grateful I still let you attend. Grateful? Grateful for what? For being treated like an afterthought at an event I paid for? For watching some smug, suited stand-in steal the only moment I'd been looking forward to since the day she was born? There was no gratitude in me. Just something colder, like grief, but without the hope of healing. I tried to think of a moment, any moment, where I'd ever made her feel like I didn't care. I tried to play back our years like a tape I could rewind, looking for the frame where I'd failed her so badly that she could justify this cruelty. But all I saw were sacrifices. Missed vacations, canceled dates, second jobs. Also, she could have everything she wanted. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe in giving her everything, I accidentally taught her that I was nothing. Just a credit card with a heartbeat. A background figure. The guy who shows up when needed, disappears when not. And now, apparently, the guy who didn't deserve a walk down the aisle. At 2:37 a.m., I picked up my phone and called Mark, my attorney. He didn't answer, of course, but I left a voicemail. Hey, it's Ray. I want to move forward with the property notice. I want her and her fiancé out of the house by end of the month. Draft it up, send it over. I'm done. I hung up before I could second guess it. Before guilt had a chance to dress up like love and talk me out of protecting myself. Because that's what this was now, not punishment, but preservation. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing this because I'd finally realized how little I meant to her. And if that's how she saw me, then she had no business living in anything I built. By sunrise, I'd packed a small box with her mail, a few documents she left on my desk, and the house keys she always forgot to return. I placed them gently in a bag, not because I cared anymore, but because spite isn't in my nature. I didn't want to damage anything, just deliver the message. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about refusing to be hurt any longer. At 9:12 a.m., Mark sent the final version of the notice. Legal, binding, cold, the way it needed to be. I printed 2 copies, one to tape to the bedroom door, the other to hand deliver. I drove to the house she'd been living in rent-free for the last 11 months. The one I bought when the market was high, fixed up with my own hands, and offered without condition. I parked in the driveway, let myself in, and left the notice on the kitchen counter. No theatrics, no note, just the paperwork and the keys. I was gone before she even got back from her post-wedding brunch. I imagine she came home still glowing from the afterglow of her big day, clinking mimosas, showing off rings, basking in the applause. And then she saw it. The envelope. My handwriting. The truth inside. My phone rang within 30 minutes. Dad. Her voice cracked like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to call me that anymore. What is this? What? Why are you doing this? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch long enough to feel uncomfortable. Long enough for her to realize this wasn't a bluff. You made your choice, I said finally. Calm. Measured. Now I'm making mine. But I didn't mean for it to be like that, she stammered. I was just trying to make everyone happy. Rick's been there too, and Mom said. I cut her off. I don't care what your mother said. I don't care what Rick did. This was my role. You knew it. You stripped it away in front of everyone. And then you had the audacity to tell me I should be grateful? Grateful for being embarrassed. It wasn't like that, she said, but her voice was already breaking. Then explain it to me, I said. Explain how the man who raised you, who paid for every part of that wedding, who never missed a single milestone. You explain how that man became a seat filler. She didn't answer, just silence. I could hear her breathing, maybe crying, but I didn't feel moved. I felt like a courtroom judge staring down a defendant who finally realized the sentence was real. Please, she said softly, don't do this. We can talk. I made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake, I replied. You made a decision. You looked at your life, your wedding, and you decided I didn't belong in the most important moment of it. You decided he did. And now I've decided you don't belong in anything I own. The line went quiet. I imagined her standing there, in that house, staring at the papers on the counter. The wedding ring still fresh on her hand. The smell of her wedding bouquet still lingering. And I wondered, did she finally feel it? The weight of what she'd done? Is there really nothing I can say? She whispered. I paused, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted her to remember the pause. I wanted her to feel the finality of it. No, I said. I've already chosen myself. And then I hung up. I didn't cry after the call. I didn't pace the floor or pour a drink or scream into the void. I just sat back in my chair and stared out the window, watching the wind rustle through the leaves. It was quiet. Not peaceful yet, but still. And in that stillness, I found the first ember of something I hadn't felt in years. Boundaries. Not vengeance. Not bitterness. Just the quiet satisfaction of a man who finally put his foot down and meant it. She showed up at my house 3 days later, unannounced, puffy-eyed, and desperate, like she had finally grasped that this wasn't a tantrum on my part. It wasn't some lesson I was trying to teach her so she'd come crawling back and we'd hug it out in a teary, made-for-TV moment. This was real. It had weight. It had permanence. She stood on my front porch in the same oversized hoodie I'd seen her steal from her high school boyfriend years ago. She used to wear it when she felt small. I watched from the living room window for a long moment before I opened the door, not out of compassion, but because I needed her to see what boundaries looked like when they were held up by something firmer than guilt. She didn't say anything at first. Her hands were tucked into her sleeves, eyes bloodshot, mascara smudged beneath them like bruises. I wondered if she expected me to yell, or fall apart, or pull her into a hug like I always used to. But I just stood there in the doorway. Still. Steady. She broke first. Dad, please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can I just come in? No, I said plainly, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. We're not doing this inside my home. She blinked at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Like she expected some version of the pushover dad who always caved, always forgave before the apology was even finished forming. But that man was gone. Buried somewhere between the ceremony she excluded me from and the smug little text she sent afterward. She shifted uncomfortably on the porch step, like she was realizing this wasn't going to go the way she planned. I didn't mean for it to get this bad, she said. I was just overwhelmed with everything. Mom kept saying how much Rick meant to her and how it would mean so much if he walked me down too. I thought you'd understand. I scoffed. Not loud, not cruel, just a small, bitter breath that left my lungs before I could stop it. So I was supposed to understand being erased? I asked. Understand watching another man do what I'd dreamed of since you were in pigtails? Understand you letting him take that walk with you while I sat in a folding chair, wondering if you even remembered I existed? She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, don't spin it. Don't say it wasn't about that. You knew exactly what it would look like. You knew what it would feel like. You just didn't care. Not enough. I do care, she insisted, and I could see the tears starting to come. I do. I was just stupid, okay? I thought I could make everyone happy, and I ended up hurting you. I didn't mean to. You meant to please them, I said. And that meant not protecting me. That meant letting Rick take my place because it made your mother happy. And you didn't even have the decency to warn me, to tell me. You let me sit there, suited up, waiting, expecting, just so you could make a grand entrance with a man who's been in your life for a handful of years while I've been there every damn day. She looked down at her shoes, and for a moment I thought she might turn around and leave. But she didn't. She took a shaky breath and said, I was scared. I thought if I told you, you'd make it all about you. That you'd cause a scene or ruin the day. I stared at her like I didn't know who she was. I left without a word. I said, voice low. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't ruin your day. I swallowed it. I gave you that moment even when you ripped it from me. And now you want to stand here and make me the villain? No, she cried. That's not what I'm saying. I know I messed up. I didn't think you'd kick me out. I didn't think you'd cut me off. Well, you should have, I said. Because that's what it means to finally choose myself. I'm not just your backup. I'm not your emergency contact when things fall apart. I'm not the bank you call when you've burned every other bridge. I'm your father. And if you can't respect that role, then you don't get access to the man who earned it. She broke down at that, hands over her face, sobbing quietly into her palms like she was mourning something she thought would always be hers. My forgiveness, my safety, my love without limits. And maybe, for a time, it had been. But love without boundaries stops being love and starts being a cage. I wasn't living in that cage anymore. Not for her. Not for anyone. A car pulled up down the street, and I recognized the driver, my neighbor, Tina, slowing down just enough to watch the scene on my porch unfold. I wondered how many others had heard about the fallout. How many knew what she did. How many thought I was overreacting. But I didn't care. Let them gossip. Let them whisper. I'd lived a life being seen as the reasonable one, the calm one, the one who kept it all together for the sake of everyone else. Now they could see me as the man who finally said enough. You're really not going to change your mind? She asked between breaths. You're really just done? I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself. That's not the same thing. And then, I opened the door behind me, stepped back inside, closed it gently. She stood there for a minute, maybe two. Then she left. Inside the house, it was quiet again. And it should have hurt more. It should have felt like a death. But it didn't. It felt like space. It felt like healing. Like closing a wound I didn't realize had been bleeding for years. By the end of the week, the whispers had turned into full-blown echoes. It started with a few sideways glances at the grocery store, the kind that trail behind you like perfume after you've passed. Then came the questions, disguised as small talk, from the neighbors. Hey, Ray heard some things. Everything okay with the family? I'd nod, give a tight-lipped smile, and say, just setting some boundaries. They'd chuckle like it was a joke, but I didn't. There wasn't anything funny about finally drawing a line in the sand after being buried beneath it for years. What surprised me most wasn't that people were talking, but that she was the one doing the talking. I'd underestimated how quickly she'd spin her version of the story. She painted herself as the daughter of a bitter, controlling father who bailed on her wedding and kicked her out for no reason. I saw it all unfold in real time, thanks to a mutual friend who forwarded me her Instagram story. White text on a pink background. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who shows up for you, not who walks away. That was her version of accountability, a pastel-colored Hallmark, quote, dressed up as wisdom. The comments were worse. Her friends, her mother's circle, even some of our extended family chimed in with crying emojis and "you deserve better," babe replies. It was like watching a slow-motion car wreck where the driver keeps waving like everything's fine. I didn't respond. Not online. Not publicly. Not even when my cousin Michelle posted a thinly veiled dig about parents who think money equals love. I just sat with it. Because here's the thing about truth, it doesn't panic. It doesn't need to shout. It just waits. And eventually, it finds ears ready to hear it. Still, I won't lie. It stung. It stung in that way only family betrayal can. I wasn't just being painted as the villain. I was being erased. And not by strangers, but by the very people who used to sit at my kitchen table, laughing over pot roast and asking for seconds. It made me question everything, my parenting, my presence, even my past sacrifices. Was I really that hard to love? Or was I just easy to take for granted until I stopped showing up the way they wanted? My sister, Elaine, called me one evening, furious. "Ray, what the hell is going on?" she asked, skipping the pleasantries. "Why is your daughter saying you threw her out after the wedding?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Because I did," I said simply. "She humiliated me. She gave my moment to someone else and told me I should be grateful. So, I made sure she understood I wasn't just a wallet with a last name." "She's your daughter," Elaine snapped. "People make mistakes. You don't cut them off for it." "This wasn't a mistake," I said, keeping my tone level. "It was a decision. She knew what she was doing. And now she knows what it costs." "She's saying you're going to disown her completely. No second chances. No forgiveness. Is that true?" There was a long pause before I answered. I could hear the TV in the background on her end, the faint hum of some sitcom laugh track. It felt like the whole world was trying to laugh through something serious. "Yes," I said. "It's true." The silence that followed wasn't surprise, it was disappointment. And that's when I realized Elaine didn't actually want the truth. She wanted the old version of me, the one who swallowed hurt and called it love, the one who could be counted on to clean up everyone else's mess. But that man didn't live here anymore. I'd buried him the night of the wedding, along with every unspoken resentment that had been weighing down my heart like sandbags tied to a drowning man. The next blow came from my ex-wife. She left a voicemail. I didn't answer, it went straight to the archive. But I listened to it, just once. Her voice was sharp, smug, and unmistakably proud. "You're really punishing your own daughter because of your bruised ego," she said. "You're just proving to her why Rick was the better choice. He doesn't walk out on people. He doesn't hold grudges like a child." I laughed, actually laughed, as I deleted the message. Rick, the savior. Rick, the replacement. She'd always had a knack for gaslighting reality into something more convenient. She couldn't handle the idea that her choices and their consequences had finally hit a wall they couldn't smooth talk over. For years, she used my love for our daughter as a shield against any real accountability. But I wasn't shielding anyone anymore. A few days later, James came by. My closest friend, my fishing buddy, the guy who knew every detail of my divorce and every tear I tried not to shed when I first became a part-time dad. He stood in my living room, arms crossed, looking at me like he didn't quite recognize me. "Ray," he said slowly, "are you sure about this?" "I mean, really sure." I nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." He scratched the back of his neck. "I get it. Believe me, if my kid pulled that crap, I'd lose it too. But cutting her off like this? Kicking her out? You're not afraid it's too far?" "I was afraid of being walked over," I said. "For years. I let them all take pieces of me because I thought that's what love meant. But I don't have to live like that anymore. I don't have to prove my worth to someone who treats me like an option." James sat with that for a moment. He didn't argue, didn't push, just nodded, slowly. "I don't know if I could have done it," he said finally. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe I should have." That night, I sat alone on the back porch, listening to the cicadas hum and watching the stars press through the dark sky. I felt the ache. Don't let anyone tell you that choosing yourself doesn't come with pain. It does. It tears. It haunts. But it also frees. I wasn't proud of how it turned out. I wasn't thrilled to be the subject of family group chat debates. But I was at peace. And in my world, peace had been in short supply for a very long time. Weeks passed. The noise quieted. No more cryptic posts. No more accusatory voicemails. Just silence, thick and unforgiving. The kind that fills a house, seeps into your coffee, and sits in the passenger seat like an unwanted ghost. At first, I welcomed it. I reveled in the quiet like it was something sacred. No knocks on my door, no texts to fix someone else's crisis, no reminders that I was only valuable when I was useful. For the first time in years, my life felt like mine. And yet, even in that hard-earned peace, I couldn't stop the ache that lived just beneath it. There's a unique kind of mourning when the person you've lost is still alive. When they're out there, breathing, laughing, living. And yet, They're no longer yours in the way they used to be. Every once in a while, I'd find myself walking past her old room and catching my breath, half expecting to see her lying across the bed scrolling through her phone or raiding the fridge at midnight and pretending it was just one slice of leftover pizza. Those memories weren't ghosts. They were worse. They were reminders of a life I'd poured everything into, only to watch it be handed over to a man who showed up halfway through the story and got the final chapter. The letter came on a Tuesday. No envelope. Just a folded piece of notebook paper tucked under my front door mat like she was ashamed to leave it in the mailbox. I nearly stepped over it without noticing, and maybe I should have. But curiosity is cruel, and grief is worse. I opened it at the kitchen table, the same spot where I used to help her with homework and talk her through boy problems and laugh about dumb memes she insisted I wouldn't understand. The handwriting was hers. Slanted, hurried, ink smudged in spots like she'd rewritten it more than once. Dad, I know you don't want to hear from me, and maybe you won't even finish reading this. But I had to try. I was wrong. About all of it. About the wedding. About Rick. About what I let Mom talk me into. I thought I was being fair. I thought I was balancing everyone's feelings. But the truth is, I let you down. I took the one thing you were supposed to have, and I gave it away like it didn't mean anything. I don't know why I did that. Maybe part of me was trying to keep the peace. Maybe part of me was just angry. But none of it justifies what I did to you. You didn't deserve that. You've always been there. You've always shown up. And I repaid that by making you feel disposable. I see it now. And I'm so sorry. She went on, apologizing for specifics. The text. The way she let people pile on without correcting them. The things she said to others about me when she knew better. She didn't ask to move back in. She didn't ask for money. She just asked for the possibility of forgiveness. Not now. Not even soon. Just someday. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer beside the salt shaker. I didn't rip it up. I didn't throw it out. But I didn't write back either. Because while part of me was moved, cracked open by her words, another part remembered the moment I stood in that church and watched her walk past me like I was invisible. And that part of me was louder. Louder than grief. Louder than love. Louder than apologies too late. A week later, her husband reached out. We hadn't spoken since the wedding, and even then, it was mostly pleasantries and thank yous for my financial support. This time, he sent an email. Mr. Delaney, I know there's a lot of tension between you and Katie. I've tried to stay out of it because I didn't think it was my place. But I see how much this is hurting her, and I'm reaching out not to change your mind, but to just say I'm sorry too. I didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. I should have done more. I should have stepped in. She regrets it, deeply. We both do. The signature was formal. Best, Connor. No request for reconciliation. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, that email hit harder than the letter. Maybe because it confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't proud of what she'd done. She just didn't expect consequences. No one ever does when they're used to being loved unconditionally. Later that night, I found myself rereading both messages. I turned them over in my hands like they might unlock something inside me, some deeper mercy I hadn't accessed yet. But all I felt was fatigue. Loving people who hurt you. That's the most exhausting job in the world. It wears you thin. It leaves you brittle. And eventually, it demands that you choose, them or you. I chose me. Elaine called again a few days later. This time she wasn't yelling. She was subdued, like she finally realized this wasn't about ego or pride. It was about survival. She's trying, Ray, she said quietly. I know she messed up, but she's not the same girl she was a month ago. I'm not the same man either, I said. And that's the problem. She wants to rewind the tape. I don't. Don't you miss her? She asked. Every damn day, I admitted. Then why? Because loving her and letting her back in are two different things, I said. And I've spent too many years confusing the two. I think that broke something in her. Because after that, Elaine didn't argue. She just sighed and said, I hope you find peace in all this. I already had. It just didn't look the way anyone expected. I didn't think peace would look like this. I used to imagine it as something soft and warm. Maybe a Sunday morning with pancakes on the stove, my daughter's laughter echoing from the next room, her future kids running wild in the yard while I watched from the porch. That was the version I held on to for years. even after the divorce, even through the hard times. I held that image like a talisman, believing that if I just kept showing up, kept loving hard enough, it would manifest into something real. But peace, I've learned, doesn't always come dressed in comfort. Sometimes it shows up wearing steel-toed boots and a locked door. Sometimes it looks like solitude. The quiet now isn't hollow, it's clean. My house stays just the way I left it. No slamming doors. No tension lingering in the air. Just the sound of the wind through the trees and the occasional creak of floorboards that remind me I'm still here. There are no more negotiations, no walking on eggshells to keep the peace between people who weaponize your love against you. I go to bed without replaying every conversation, without wondering what version of me they're discussing in private, without mourning the man I had to shrink into to keep the family machine running. I still think about her. Of course I do. That doesn't switch off just because I made a decision. She's still my daughter in blood, if not in bond. I wonder if she still cries when she drives past the house. If she rereads my text the way I reread hers. If she regrets it more now that the wedding photos have aged and the applause has faded. I wonder if Rick still wears that smug grin, or if he's finally started to understand the damage he helped engineer. But mostly, I wonder how long it'll take before she realizes I didn't stop loving her. I just started loving me more. There's a photo of us in my study. She's 7, missing her 2 front teeth, wearing a Little League uniform that hung too big on her shoulders. I'm kneeling beside her, arms slung around her like the world couldn't touch us. And back then, it couldn't. She used to beg me to come to every game, and I never missed one. Even when her mother said it wasn't my weekend. Even when it meant switching shifts or driving 2 hours in traffic. I was there. Always. And that's what made it all so hard to reconcile. Because people don't just throw you away, they inch you out, one choice at a time, until the space you once filled is nothing more than a footnote. I kept that photo up, not because I needed the memory, but because it grounded me in the truth. That once I was enough. That once I was her whole world. And while that world may have changed, it didn't erase the man I was, or the man I still am. It reminded me that my worth wasn't defined by her wedding aisle or the narrative she spun afterward. It lived in the quiet moments, the daily choices, the decades of effort that no one but me and that photo will ever fully understand. Last week, I saw her at the grocery store. It was unexpected, jarring in that way time bends when you see someone who used to be a part of your everyday. She was pushing a cart filled with produce and baby formula. Pregnant, visibly. A small bump beneath her sweater, her hand resting instinctively on her belly. She caught my eye from across the aisle, froze for a second, then offered a cautious, almost reverent nod. I nodded back, but didn't smile. I didn't walk over. I didn't ask about the baby, or the nursery, or the future she used to dream about in my passenger seat on long drives home from school. She didn't come closer either. We passed each other in silence, like two people who used to be something sacred and were now strangers with shared memories. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't cry. She just watched me walk away. This time, not from a church, not from a seat I was denied, but from a life I had chosen to release. Afterward, I sat in the car for a while, hands resting on the wheel, that familiar ache blooming quietly in my chest. Not regret, not sadness, just weight. The weight of knowing what I'd given up and what I'd gained in return. I'd lost a daughter, but I'd gained something else. Something quieter, but far more honest. I'd gained the right to no longer betray myself in the name of keeping others comfortable. I wrote her a letter the next morning. Not to send, just to write. I didn't even sign my name. I just wrote it all down. Everything I'd wanted to say the day of her wedding. Everything I'd swallowed. Every pang of disappointment. Every flicker of pride. Every word I withheld because I thought love meant silence. I ended the letter with one line that summed it all up. You lost a father the moment you stopped seeing me as one. Then I folded it up and tucked it into a box with her old soccer medals, drawings from first grade, and the Father's Day cards she made with construction paper and glitter glue. That box stays in my closet, not because I need it, but because it reminds me that even the most painful love stories start with beauty. And sometimes, that beauty is enough to carry you forward, just not enough to bring you back. People ask me if I'd ever reconcile. If there's a version of this where we find our way back. And to that I say, love is a two-way street. I walked every inch of my side for 30 years. She turned her back when it mattered most. So no, there is no version where I go chasing someone who made me feel disposable in front of the people I was supposed to celebrate her with. There is no version where I let her back and just because time passed and babies were born and everyone else thinks it would be a nice ending. This is the ending, and it's enough. Sometimes peace doesn't come wrapped in reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from finally choosing yourself, even when it breaks your heart. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you raised, someone you loved with everything, share your story in the comments. What does peace look like for you now? If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more of these real, raw family stories to light. See you soon in the next story.